As Trump's polling continues to crater, particularly on the economy, he's become even more desperate and incoherent, as demonstrated by conversations he had over the weekend with reporters, as he tried in vain to defend his trade war, particularly against China. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we got several clips to play because we're going to catch up with Donald Trump over the weekend. He flew to Europe to attend the funeral of the Pope. He chatted with reporters on Air Force One en route to Europe, and then once he landed back in the United States. So we're going to play these clips starting in reverse order.
Plenty of problems in the world. You know, when I left 4.5 years ago, I left, and I'll tell you what, we didn't have any of these problems. The good news is costs are way down, groceries are down, eggs are down, gasoline is way down. It's all coming down. It's all looking good. The tariffs are strong. We're taking in a lot of money from tariffs. We were losing a lot before I got here. We were losing billions of dollars a day, and now we're doing great, and we haven't even kicked in yet. And eventually we'll be reducing taxes very substantially for the people of our country because the money is so great coming in from tariffs that I'll be able to reduce taxes to a very large extent, and maybe almost completely.
Again, incoherent, totally full of shit. There is no evidence whatsoever that the tariffs, that the revenue generated by tariffs would replace the income tax, number one. Number two, there's absolutely no way that retailers and companies in the United States would foot the bill on tariffs and not pass the cost on to consumers. Trump himself recently admitted this at the Oval Office, talking about the tariffs he imposed on Chinese goods. He's like, listen, no American wants to pay the increased cost because of the tariffs that we impose on Chinese goods. And well, that applies to all your tariffs, dumbass. This idea that he could replace the federal income tax virtually based on revenue generated from tariffs is absurd. The idea that prices for everything is going down, also absurd. Inflation has continued under Donald Trump. Egg prices, yes, have bounced up and down, but have generally trended upward since Donald Trump came into office. And the notion that, he talks about gas and oil. Oil prices globally have dipped because there is fears of a global recession. This is not a good thing unless Trump wants to try to take credit for potentially triggering a global recession, which I doubt he would. Here's another clip.
And we're going to make a lot of money, and we're going to cut taxes for the people of this country. It'll take a little while before we do that, but we're going to be cutting taxes, and it's possible we'll do a complete tax cut because I think the tariffs will be enough to cut all of the income tax. Now, we have a lot of debt that's been left to us, unfortunately, over many years. We'll take care of that, but the tariffs, if people only understood the tariffs, we're going to be giving people of this country a tremendous tax cut. And we're going to start with people making less than $200,000 a year.
So, again, even conservative economists, even Trump-supporting conservative economists acknowledge that tariffs are a tax increase. And they're also a regressive tax because the prices that are increased as a consequence of tariffs tend to hit poor and poorer people harder. So it's a regressive tax. And again, what Trump did in terms of his tariffs is effectively create the single biggest peacetime tax hike on the American people in American history. Even Trump's own former vice president, Mike Pence, among others, acknowledged that as well. So again, totally full of shit. No evidence to support it. No evidence to support that he can replace the income tax with tariffs because, again, those costs would be passed on. But I will remind you that Donald Trump is seeking to extend his 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act legislation, which was basically the only major piece of domestic legislation he accomplished in terms of, like landmark bills. And it was for the worse because the benefits of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, more than 80% of it went to those who needed the least, the millionaires and billionaires in this country. So when Trump says, we're going to cut taxes, what he really means is he's going to try to cut taxes for millionaires and billionaires, the donor class of his party. Again, he could do this if he were truly, an economic populist who wanted to benefit the middle class and poor. He would just cut taxes for the middle class and poor and keep taxes fairly high on the rich. He's not doing that. He's seeking to primarily cut taxes on the rich and increase the tax burden on middle and lower classes. So again, just totally stupid on this, but that's Donald Trump for you. Here's another clip.
He's saying 2 weeks about President Putin. What is 2 weeks? Give us, what is the actual date? What is the timeline? 2 weeks or less, and if it's a little more at the time, I say, but, they're losing a lot of people. We have
2 weeks is 2 weeks, maybe less. Or more. It's always 2 weeks. He says everything in 2 weeks. He said this famously. It's why people made fun of him about his healthcare plan. Remember, he intended initially to repeal and replace Obamacare when he ran for his first term. He even talked about it in his second and third campaigns before quietly walking it back because, of course, Obamacare is relatively popular. And Vice President Kamala Harris zinged Trump pretty hard during their presidential debate when she asked him about his, healthcare plan. He's like, well, I've got concepts of a plan. He's constantly moving the goalposts. There is no evidence to indicate that Trump has made any meaningful strides towards a meaningfully beneficial trade deal with any major country, let alone China. But he's just bullshitting. So those were clips of Trump landing back in the United States after he went to Europe to attend the Pope's funeral. These clips I'm about to show you are interactions he had with reporters on Air Force One as he went to Europe.
Yeah, pretty good man.
Mr. President, any update on Secretary Hegseth, your confidence in him?
About what?
With having Signal on his
I don't view Signal
on
as
his work computer, what do you think?
I don't view Signal as important. I think it's fake news.
Fake news. Okay, so that was a divergence there about Pete Hegseth and Signalgate, where members of the Trump administration accidentally leaked sensitive classified war plans to a journalist, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. That was Signalgate 1.0. Then we learned a few weeks later that Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, sent basically those same classified, highly sensitive military war plans to his wife, his brother, and his personal attorney. 3 people who need not, at the very least we could say, with the exception of Jeffrey Goldberg in the first Signalgate, all the other people on that Signalgate text thread, which again shouldn't have happened because Signal is not authorized for the dispensation of highly sensitive classified military information. I digress. But the people that Hegseth was talking to, with the exception of Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, all had every right to know what the hell was going on in terms of the bombing of the Houthis. But in the second Signalgate scandal, Hegseth's wife didn't need to know. His brother didn't need to know. And his personal attorney didn't need to know either. So again, another national security breach from a walking national security breach, which is Pete Hegseth. But Trump does not want to give the media a win. He doesn't want to give the liberals a win. He doesn't want to give progressives and Democrats a win. So he's going to double down on Hegseth publicly until potentially he fires him, which is what Trump used to do, by the way. Trump would always double down on his supportive people even when he ultimately fired them. It's just what he did. He's not going to say, you know what, you're probably right about him. You know what? Democrats were right about Pete. He wasn't really experienced for the job. I shouldn't have appointed him. No, he's just going to double down until he cuts bait, which he may or may not do. But people shouldn't say, oh, just because Trump is doubling down on him means he'll never fire him. He doubled down on all the other people he fired, and then he fired them. So we'll see what happens.
Mr. President, you said that you've spoken to President Xi multiple times. Is that since taking office, sir?
I don't want to discuss that. I'm speaking to a lot of people from China, but I'm speaking to people from all over the world on the tariffs, and we're making very good deals. Very good. It's going to make our country rich. We're not going to be ripped off like we have been for the last literally 50 years.
It just occurred to me while Trump was talking, in one of the previous clips we played in this video, Trump also talked about the national debt. I think it was like the last clip I played of him where he's wearing the hat coming back to America, and it just reminded me. I will remind you that Donald Trump he contributed a quarter of that debt, $8 trillion. Trump added in a single 4-year term. It's greater than any presidential contribution to the national debt in a similar amount of time. So Donald Trump is by far the most profligate U.S. president in terms of his spending. So this idea that, we inherited all this debt. Like, no, man, you did more than anybody, given the amount of time you were in office, to create that debt in the first place. So that's your debt. And regarding this clip, again, people are pressing Trump. Well, you say you're talking to China, but China says you're not talking to them. Which is it? And he says, well, I don't want to get into it, which suggests he's full of shit and he's trying to bluff his way into stabilizing the markets. Like, yeah, Xi and I are on the phone all the time. We're negotiating this deal. Everything's good. I will also remind you that the Trump administration promised 90 deals in 90 days. That was their commitment. That was their commitment to you and me and everybody else. They will and have already begun trying to move the goalposts. Well, maybe it's not 90 deals because deals take months, years to negotiate and ratify, because, of course, trade deals actually have to be ratified by the United States legislature. The president has considerable authority regarding delegated authority, by the way, which is irresponsible, as this proves. But the president does have considerable authority regarding tariffs. He does not have the power to unilaterally finalize trade deals. He can negotiate, but they have to be ratified by Congress. And certainly the Republican majority in Congress will ratify it more than likely, but it still has to go through that process. So you also consider that too. They have to have the conversations, they have to have the negotiations, they have to make the agreement, and then it has to be ratified in 90 days, times 90. They have to do 90 of these things in 90 days. So now they're moving the goalposts saying, well, we're going to have an architecture, we're going to have framework for 90 deals in 90 days. Well, that's not what you promised, asshole. That's not what you promised. So when they try to move the goalpost on you, which they always do, that's what Donald Trump and MAGA do, don't buy it. Don't give them the charity. Don't give them the grace and say, no, you promised 90 days or 90 deals in 90 days. I want my deals. And if you don't deliver it, then I get to blame you for not having it. Here's another clip.
Millions of dollars. That's not sustainable.
Mr. President, can you commit that nobody on your financial team was giving any type of tips to Wall Street executives about deals with India? There was some reporting yesterday that people had heads up on Wall Street, possibly to make money. Can you commit that that did not happen?
I can commit to myself. That's all I can commit. I have thousands of people that work for me, but I can't imagine anybody doing that.
If they did,
I have very honorable people that I can.
He says he has very honorable people. He's full of shit. I mean, again, the notion, there are calls for investigation into this, that the Trump administration either facilitated or contributed to some sort of like insider trading. Now, again, you actually have to prove that claim for it to be valid, but certainly it doesn't look good that when Trump is, doing and undoing tariffs and things like that, his political allies, have benefited from very suspicious, purchases or selling of stock, right? We covered that in a previous video. Certainly it merits an investigation, and then you have to abide by the results of the investigation. It could be that these people are just cosmically lucky, or it could be that there was some tip-off in advance of the 90-day tariff pause. Who knows? But again, there have been multiple essays written about this, again, even by conservative financial analysts going, this is kind of shady, so there should be an investigation. I'm going to play one last clip. It's relatively long, of Trump being incoherent about where he is on his China trade war.
What kind of movement do you consider substantial from China?
Well, free up China. Let us go in and work China because, frankly, that's what we wanted last time. We almost got it, and then they backed out of that deal. But we had it to go into China and sell our product, sell our wares. In other words, it's called to open China. That would be great. That would be a big win. But I'm not even sure I'm going to ask for it because they don't want it open.
Mr.
They don't
President,
want it open.
on the immigration
The
front,
big thing are the tariffs. But because of tariffs, I could possibly get that. What do you think? Opening up China would be a big win, right? The problem is no matter how big the win is, the press will not give you credit for it. If I got the greatest win in history, they'll pay us trillions and trillions of dollars. They'll give us anything we want. The press will say, Trump, he just had a terrible defeat. He suffered a terrible defeat. But the people don't. No, I think we're going to have a lot of big wins. I don't know if it's going to be covered that way by the fake news, but the wins are going to be very substantial. We're losing.
So again, he's just meandering incoherently. What does a substantial win look to you? Well, it's like a really big win. But you know what? Even if I get a really big win, it's not like the fake news is going to cover it well. I mean, they're just going to say that I suffered a defeat. In contrast, Donald Trump will take like any outcome he's going to try to spin as a huge win. Oh my God, Xi picked up the phone and answered my call. It's a huge win. It's a huge win. No president could be ever be able to talk to the Chinese premier. I called, Xi picked up. It's basically, listen, Americans struggling to afford things. Xi Jinping, with whom I have a fantastic relationship, he answered my phone call. He told me how I'm such a big, strong, big boy. That's a win. The fake news media won't spin it that way. Like, no, you actually need to deliver tangible benchmarks, right? Like, what are the specifics of a substantial win? What are the sort of things specifically that count as a substantial win to you? Trump doesn't know because he's just bullshitting his way through. And he doesn't want to pigeonhole himself or back himself into a corner by giving benchmarks to which we could hold him accountable. But it's also like, well, if you're doing so well with these trade deals and they're already underway, we're so close to some big deals. Well, then why don't you just talk about, like, give a preview of the terms that you've pretty much got wrapped up with China and other countries? Like, pre-frame it in advance, like these things that I'm that you're supposedly you've pretty much got locked down. Make that the definition of a substantial win. Oh, it's A, B, C, and D, which I pretty much already got wrapped up already. But he's not even doing that. So he's further betraying the fact that they really are nowhere, at least nowhere meaningful with respect to these trade deals. And so, yeah, Trump is becoming, again, increasingly desperate, increasingly incoherent. He says that the American people are with him on this. The polls, as we've discussed, say clearly otherwise. It's a bad look. He's in deep shit. But in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.